So hello to everyone. Hello to all the guests that are with us. Hello to all the participants of the panel. It's a pleasure for us to have you with us today for this webinar, which is called Alternative Mobility in Africa, the Future of E-Mobility Solutions on the Continent. As you'll see, we will focus specifically on mobility when it comes to bikes and e-bikes today. And it's a very interesting and important topic, as mobility in the end decides if someone has access to his or her job, to a doctor, or to a school. So being able to reach a certain point at a certain point of time is quite important for everyone in the world. Even though we will learn that many things can be done remotely, especially now during the COVID times, we've all went through it, but there are so many things that require physical presence, be it of people or be it goods that need to be at a certain place at a certain time. And that's why we're so happy to host this webinar today in collaboration with the Deutsches Institut für Gutes Leben, DIFGL, which basically means an institute on how to live good. That's basically the translation. And mobility obviously is one of the factors that make one's life good or can make it maybe not as good as it could be. And also in collaboration with the TU Berlin, which is the Technical University of Berlin. So we're very happy to have you here. For all the guests today, we have some housekeeping rules, which are basically very, very easy. So in fact, what you can do, you will see a Q&A function. So under that function, you can ask all your questions. You can send them in whenever they come to your mind. And me and our co-host, Mame, we'll check the questions and at a certain time then ask them also to the panelists so that you have the chance to also ask specifically what is of interest to you. To how we will go through that panel today, it's basically that we will start with Christophe Henzella, who is a representative of the Institute we just talked of, and also a representative of the TU Berlin, who will give us a bit of an introduction to the topic of e-mobility globally, but also what kind of implications this could have for the African continent. With that, I think we can already jump in. Whenever you have questions, as mentioned, just put it in the questions and answers box, and we're happy to pick them up later on. And also we have distinguished guests today who are already the ones who implement the solutions on the continent in different countries, specifically today in Zambia and South Africa, and also one of the developers of one of the promising solutions for the future. But we will come to that step by step. All of them will have the chance to introduce themselves and introduce their solutions. And we're starting with Christoph Henseler, who will give us a bit of a context. Christoph, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here, and I'm very, thank you for your kind words and for the nice introduction. A very warm welcome also from my side to our viewers, participants, or I don't know how you call it in these virtual meetings. Yes, 2 words on me. I'm working for a long time in the mobility field. I'm not from the field of, let's say, development cooperation per se, but much more also about mobility studies in Germany. I co-developed the new research agenda of the German Research Ministry for Sustainable Urban Mobility, and did a few projects also in South Africa in a kind of international cooperation in this technological terms. I will come to this later, but wanted to give you a short introduction, so to say, under the question, if I got it right, why e-mobility and why Africa, so to say. Is it right, Sannssi? I shall go into the topic directly now. Okay, then as a first word about the topic, as we called it, of course, Africa is not a country, it's not a village, it's not a country, it's a big continent. So talking about Africa, so to say, has always its kind of problems, because it's a kind of very broad assumptions and so on. And of course, I'm aware of this. Nonetheless, in this context, it makes a little bit sense, at least if we kind of focus our view rather on the kind of sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Africa. There are different terms for this part, not the Northern African states, a little bit structured differently, but there are a few structural aspects which make Africa kind of special for our field. And I would say Africa is, and this is for me one of the most interesting aspects why I talk about Africa even as a continent is a greenfield in transport and infrastructure in many ways. So this is a sad state of affairs for its citizens, residents, and so all across the continent, but at the same time gives kind of some chances, I would say. And to give you a kind of very short picture what I mean with this structural issue. If for the World Bank compiles data on these issues for sub-Saharan, under the umbrella sub-Saharan Africa. So, for example, only 34% of residents in rural Southern Africa have a road access. And this is kind of mirrored also if you have a look at other studies in the street density by area. It's 10 kilometers per 1,000 square kilometers, but 37 in other low-income countries. And you can see there are a lot of things. There's a very big lack of infrastructure due to also colonial history. A lot of people are aware of this missing transversals in Africa to kind of really cross the continent, also for administrative reasons. But the same question arises up down to the rural level. To all things, there's a lack of infrastructure. It's the same applies actually for electricity. Also in rural Africa, only 22% of residents have, it's a little bit older, these numbers have access to constant electricity. And this compares also to other world regions like Latin America, where it's 91%. So Africa is special. It's often seen as just poor. That's not what I mean at this point, but it's really a greenfield for transport. And to explain why I find this so interesting and when we come to this panel is that we can look at Asia, especially China, as a counterexample. It's now very much hailed as a kind of front runner in mobility projects, in transport projects, and that's not wrong. They're technically very advanced. They're trying in some parts to catch up. In some parts, they're already past Western approaches. They're very experimental, especially in the field of smart cities and so on. But if you look at it from the broad, from a higher perspective, you see they're more or less rebuilt. So yeah, Western model of infrastructures in cities, road-based, car-based infrastructure, which led to problems in the 80s in Germany, the US, and so on. And now the same problems come to China, and they're also trying to engineer them away. And I think Africa, a lot of areas in Africa, there is still a chance for a different development. And that's why these facts of lack of roads and lack of electricity networks, for me, kind of raises a bigger question and a kind of question for a vision. Can't we plan? Would we plan transport systems the way we did it in the 1920s or in the 1980s or in the 1990s? Or don't we have, due to electric mobility, and the kind of rise of autonomous vehicles, driving and flying and so on, a different situation? And should we rebuild, so to say, our Western infrastructure? And don't we have a very much chance, especially for, and then I will head over to kind of my co-panelists already, to kind of go different paths, especially with electromobility. The lack of electricity grids, in a way, also opens up now other avenues for decentralized energy production in villages and smaller towns and so on, and using electromobility as a kind of mobile battery, mobile buffer, so to say. It's a very common thing. It's called mobility to grid or so, as a kind of buzzword. I think these, and what I want to make a point, these kind of lack of infrastructure also gives a chance to build a different transport system, and a transport system which has a higher quality of life, so to say. And that, for me, kind of the important point. It's not the idea we should push our ideas of sustainability to another continent. They should do the savings and we can continue our lifestyle. But I think that we all kind of hate in some way our kind of road-obsessed society. We have a lot of problems with it. And can't we build kind of more sustainable and more attractive mobility models and transport systems, which kind of, especially for rural areas? And that's kind of where we come from, so to say. And one thing, and I think that's kind of was for me a game changer, was finding Ollie and Stefan with their off-road electric cargo bike, which really, and I will probably explain it for me, in some ways is a game changer, at least as a bridge technology, because you can build transport systems without building the roads first, which is kind of important because it's also a time question. And so exploring the broader question, how we can utilize electric mobility, especially bicycle mobility, so to say, is, I would say, is the lead question of our panel. And yeah, with this, I would stop. I will say a little bit more about my vision, but I think I don't want to get too far because we have a lot of interesting examples which also show how this is kind of in a nexus with other topics of a better and sustainable life, water connection, accessibility, electricity production, agriculture, and so on. So seeing this as a kind of complex and also interacting system, which might lead to a different model of kind of as well mobility and logistics, and on the other hand, general kind of sustainable life, is I think we can explore and might avoid rebuilding the same bad structures we had in Europe and now in China, and kind of try a leapfrogging like in other areas. And with this, I would close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for this input, Christoph. I think in the meantime, my internet connection broke. So when we talk about infrastructure, this is also one of the challenges, which happens from time to time. But thanks for your input. And thanks for giving the context. And also there was one thing that you have mentioned that was actually quite interesting. And you said a chance of a different development. So basically, many regions and countries are already locked into a certain technology, into a certain way of doing things. So we have the chance to do things differently, which of course is something that we can use and utilize and leverage on. And with this, we basically go to our first hands-on example of what are those things and those examples, how things can be differently when it comes to the mobility sector. And with this, I would actually hand over to our guest, Nicho Ntema. He is a strategist at Sharpeville. Sharpeville is a project that has started and that is all about how can the community benefit from such solutions that we had discussed or that we had mentioned before. And with this, Nicho, I would suggest you unmute yourself so that the audience can hear you, so that you have the chance basically to explain and talk about this case, how such a solution can look like and how it can be applied, also involving communities. Because in the end, all what we talk about, we can talk about technology, but at the end, it is people who should then benefit from those technologies. So Nicho, I'm handing over to you now.
Thank you so much, and good evening from South Africa, and good afternoon to the rest of Europe. My name is Nicho Ntema, as it has been said, and I'm quite happy and privileged to be part of this discussion today. I'm going to talk about the good practice example that has happened in Sharpeville in terms of the impact that these bicycles per se has brought in from Anywhere.berlin. But you'll find within my discussion that not only bicycles made an impact, but we managed to get introduced to green technologies and sustainable living and other ways of getting energy from sources that are not traditional. But the background goes back to the GLIX program that was brought into South Africa through the assistance of the German Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature, Conservation, Building and Nuclear Safety. And that's when we met Christoph, and then we introduced to Oliver as well as Stefan. And we were cleaning up the township at the time because of the waste that was not properly managed. But at the end of the day, we wanted to get some assistance, and our local government introduced us to our provincial government, and the provincial government introduced us to the GLIX project. That's when we got the bikes to come here. It was just an assistance at the time, but you can imagine if we get assistance that is bringing opportunities for us to study what we call waste management through replacement of the waste harvesters trolleys into electric cargo bikes. And that's when Anywhere.berlin came up with that product, and CSIR helped us to do the study. And we managed to actually find out how we can assist the trolley pushers and trolley harvesters to have a better mobility solution to their problems. But more things came out of that, in a sense that through our discussions with Anywhere.berlin, we came up with a concept called Anywhere Africa. That's where we wanted to centralize Anywhere.berlin operations in other parts of Africa. And we got introduced to what they were doing in Kenya in terms of moving water. And then recently we got introduced to Zambia, where we'll be looking at new opportunities to actually bring all that into practice. But the forget roads mobility punchline becomes critical in what Christoph has just said, that there's no point in actually spending money to build roads, whereas you can actually have mobility that doesn't need roads, but have an impact on communities and society at large. And it actually makes this a natural evolution from the concept that energy and mobility becomes a movement now in Africa, where we can have powered vehicles that are powered off-grid, that can use the sun and other alternative energies, but have batteries on themselves to be able to impact on those communities. So we are bringing that as Anywhere Africa now as a mobility, energy, and sustainable green livelihoods. And that's where Green Sharpeville features, because that's where all these things have actually been pioneered. And we remain grateful to the German government and Anywhere.berlin for that. So we have pioneered that process. The bikes landed in Sharpeville in October 2018. And as I said, they were going to be used for the study to see the feasibility of electrifying the waste harvester trolleys. And then we got the support through the GLIX project, where Anywhere.berlin brought in the kits and started training our local people who originally were just volunteers that were cleaning up the township at that time. And since 2019, the Sharpeville microfactory that was established has produced multiple bikes, but also introduced the bikes to South Africa as well as other countries through the Smarter Mobility Africa conference that actually had lots of people who were following it. We had multiple television interviews as well as radio and broadcast and newspaper reports. And the microfactory at the moment has managed to introduce more than 20 people to the e-mobility manufacturing processes. And we have engaged and trained 6 welders who have never welded light steel tubes before. And we've also trained 6 electronics technicians who now know how to wire and connect batteries as well as reconfigure the controllers. And there are 2 young people now who have been trained on programming the bikes on their various functionalities based on their connections. And the factory has also trained mechanics. We can assemble all mechanical parts to the bike. And the product actually was made, about 15 units that were produced. And has been tested and lessons were learned with extensive training and development engaged. And that came out of a team of 20 people in total that have been coming in and out to actually find out what is that they can do. But that has got us into an interest from the Department of Social Development in Gauteng that are now assisting us to fund an extended training program for young people. So we'll be getting extra 10 people, young people, and mainly females that will be getting training in terms of what we do, especially from the mechanics, electronics, and other things that we have mentioned. So this relationship didn't only make an impact on Sharpeville per se. It made an impact to a point that we now talk to other people in other countries, and Wyson is one of the people that even we have signed an agreement of cooperation to see how we can actually look into working together in the future. But the cargo bikes have created in temporary jobs for 15 people. We are retaining 4 on a permanent basis now that are working with us at the center. And we've done a durability test on them. We have served 300 meals a day to about 4 communities, doing about 780 trips in the past 3 years. And during the COVID-19 lockdown level 5 in South Africa, we distributed about 1,000 food parcels to 4 communities as well. And we're actually riding these bikes as well to go to those places where the department was dropping off that food. So Anywhere.berlin remains our anchor in terms of technology and design. And we have done our own bit in terms of changing some of the designs to develop new products. So we are sitting with new, actually 6 models on the base that was supplied by Anywhere.berlin, which gave us an opportunity for our young people to bring out ideas to bring that product. But we still maintain, forget roads, anywhere in Africa where mobility has to happen, will bring those particular solutions. And those solutions are coming up with the energy solutions as well, including waste management, where it is a problem. On that score, I'll end it there, and then we'll be taking questions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicho, for that input. Quite a beautiful project that you're running, and I think the beauty of this project, as Nicho has also mentioned, is that this is something that could be rolled out also in other places in Africa. So it is actually at the moment implemented in Sharpeville, South Africa, but there's nothing that speaks against rolling that out and scaling the solution once the project is, I would say it's already running in Sharpeville, but totally running, through the feasibility. But I think you have shown already that it is feasible, and that it can have an effect on the community. So this is quite interesting. The second beauty that I just saw, Nicho, is that the value creation, a big part of the value creation happens locally in Sharpeville, in the community. Yeah. So the production of the bikes, not only the utilization of the bikes, but also the production. So congratulations for setting this up. And I hope some people in the audience will take example of what you're doing, and hopefully also reach out to you to see in which other places we could implement, or they could implement then solutions like this. And we're going with this to our next speaker, Nkapu Ranake, chairperson of Sharpeville Kasi Development Project. And Nkapu, it is a pleasure to have you here with us today. And we have heard already now about the technical solution that is implemented. And it would be interesting to hear first about you, so who you are and what your role is in that project, and then also to hear a bit more about the implications and impact such a project can have on the society, and also specifically on women who play a big role, of course, in societies.
Thank you very much, Sannssi, and good afternoon to everyone, and to my fellow panelists and the viewers at home and the world. My name is Nkapu Ranake. I'm the chairperson of SKDP, which is Sharpeville Kasi Development Project, born out of a cleaning campaign that we started in 2018 as communities, volunteers, volunteering to clean our township so that we can keep it clean and safe and have a clean environment. What we did, we recruited volunteers, mainly were women and youth, young people. And after we have planned and came up with a program of cleaning, we then consulted with our ward councillors, our mayor, and the Department of Roads and Transport here in our district area to assist us with the cleaning equipment and the trucks, to remove the rubbish. So we didn't know that this program will take long, because it took more than the time that we set up for us. And we then realized that we still need to clean the area, because basically what we're doing, we're actually also removing the illegal dumps, the rubble that was there, and turning those illegal dumps into parks. And we have, I think, more than 10 parks that we turned from illegal dumps into a very nice, beautiful spaces where our kids, older people that can sit there and enjoy. We then went to the Department of Transport here in Gauteng, and we met Mr. Fuad Hendricks, who then introduced us to DIFGL. We met Christoph and the other members that came to South Africa with the project of DIFGL. And after that, we were then introduced to Oliver and Stefan in terms of the e-bikes that they were manufacturing. And we were then asked to do a study with CSIR to check whether our waste harvesters can carry their whatever that they have harvested on those e-cargo bikes. But unfortunately, after the study, we have found out that the type of things that they were using was too big for them to can carry or put them in front of the bicycle. And what happened then is that we were told that this will not then assist the department, because their intention was to also make sure that they deal with these people, because sometimes they do cause accidents. And we then continued with our collaboration with Oliver and Stefan, and the department then they had about 10 e-bikes that they were supposed to do the pilot on them. And then the MEC at that time, MEC Vadi, gave us about 8 bikes. And these 8 bikes, for us to can assemble them, we then had to have Oliver and Stefan to come to Sharpeville to train our young people to assemble and make sure that they understand exactly how to weld and so on. And we then recruited about 6 young women who mainly, some of them were welders, qualified welders, and others, they were then trained in terms of small technical mechanical issues, in terms of making sure that how to assemble these bikes. And we're grateful that they got interest also as young women to have their own businesses in future, to can assemble or manufacture these bikes. And as we speak now, there are about 2 of them who are now employed as well as after being trained here at the center. So what then happened is that after this, we have realized that there is an opportunity for young women in particular to can be trained and then manufacture these bikes. We then went to the department again, and we were then introduced to the Department of Social Development, and because it has to do with the skills development, and the department agreed to assist us. We're hopeful very soon we'll be able to then start the training of these young women, or actually youth, to come and be trained on how to can manufacture, assemble these bikes. The topic actually is about having to check in terms of the chances of job opportunities for women on using these bikes. I think there are many or a lot of opportunities that can be used by women to can carry whatever that they want to carry, because they are very light for others, but others, they feel like they are heavy. But we had 2 young women who can ride these bikes, and they have trained some of the young women who have shown interest in terms of carrying on with these bikes, whether using them for their own businesses, small businesses. But we are very fortunate that we also having an engagement with the Department of Trade and Industry here in South Africa, who have shown interest to support us in terms of taking this opportunity further, for making sure that our young people in the main women are trained in terms of manufacturing these bikes. And we are sure that this can create jobs, and they can also be then exported from Sharpeville here, being manufactured here in Sharpeville. They can be exported to our African countries. Like we met Wyson, who came to Sharpeville, and we have shown him that how we doing these things. And there are other countries that we can also export them, so that we can assist in terms of making sure that our African women in particular can have a transport that can be easily accessible for them to can take whatever they want to take to the markets to sell. We have also a sister company or an NGO, Kizo Information Development Center, which we're working with in terms of cooking food for our disadvantaged communities. And with these bikes, our young women who can ride are delivering this food for to our people who cannot be able to come to the center to have their meals. The other issue is that I heard Christoph talking about the alternative energy generation, because our rural areas in the main here in Africa, we're struggling actually to have, I mean, our people are struggling to have electricity, but we have also made a study with a university, or the Valley University of Technology, in terms of other alternative measures that can be looked at to generate energy. And we know that we can generate energy from the wet food waste, and also from sewer. And it is possible that this can be done, and it can create jobs for our people and for our women. And it will be, I think it will be a better solution for us in Africa, and we can see our lives of our ordinary people changing for the better. And I'm really humbled that I got an opportunity to be part of this discussion as a woman. And Mami, we are the only 2 women against 5 men, but nevertheless, we're getting there. Next time, maybe there will be 50-50, or will be more than men, to show that women are there, and they can do better also as human beings. Thank you very much.
Nkapu, thank you so much for this input. Thank you for talking about the history of how it has developed, and also especially giving that insight, as many people might maybe think when it comes to welding, when it comes to certain jobs, as the default would be men would do it, which really must not be the case. And thank you also for showing how it is possible differently. And also your hint for the panel is clearly understood, and we take that into account. We hope that also by the next time we'll have the chance to have more women on the panel. Also to maybe this panel is even a chance to understand, to get to know more women who are active in the space. Because I think there are many, and I think there are many who have to share a lot of learnings and solutions that they're implementing in their countries and their communities. So thank you for that input. We will come back to you very soon. And as you've seen in the audience, we have thought through how to structure this discussion. We started with the overall outlook and the overall importance of the topic of mobility when Christoph gave us the input, and now we went to Sharpeville to look at a technical solution in the e-mobility sector that can create value for communities, for the people who utilize the bikes, for the people but also who produce them and create value through that, and also by involving different groups of stakeholders into the process. And now we make a move from South Africa to Zambia. In Zambia, from Zambia, we have our guest Wyson Lungu, who is the CEO and founder of Onyx. and he will tell himself something about the company and about the approach. But before going there, I would like to guide you a bit to where we are going now. So one, geographically, we're going to Zambia, but also we look now not only at e-mobility, but we also look specifically on how can such a model economically make sense. Because in the end of the day, when we want to deploy solutions on a larger scale, there need to be economic models. And Wyson from Onyx has such a model in place. So Wyson, I would ask you to introduce yourself to the audience and then also give a bit of an overview of what you do and how you do it.
Thank you very much, Sannssi, and good afternoon and good evening to all the participants, depending on the region you are tuning us in from. My full names are Wyson Lungu. I'm the founder and CEO for Onyx Connect. I'm a very passionate entrepreneur. I'm not a politician. I'm not a charity. My job is to make sure that we help people, especially women in Africa. That's the agenda I have taken so personally, and we've made some strides so far to see how we can be able to drive the African agenda, especially on the aspect of mobility. I'll just give you a context. As Onyx, we are looking to at least minimum provide 1 million bikes by 2030. At that scale, you are able to transform an entire country or an entire region. Very, very important. In the last 2 years, we've been working with our funders, who funded us, and being also having monitoring supervision with a London-based organization called FTL, which is Frontliner Live Streaming Technologies. So we wanted to see if we introduced a pay-as-you-go bike system in Africa, specifically in Zambia, would that work? And we have so far validated different assumptions, and we already are working with a lot of women groups. I'll just go through probably some of the dynamics of the women groups that we're working with, and also to cover the point which Nkapu mentioned, we are including women and youth. The reason being is that when you look at the African context, the people that drive the social and economic agenda are women, not men. The reason is that they're the people that make sure that the kids go to school. When somebody's sick in the household family, they're the people that make sure that the child goes to the clinic. And also at a very small scale, they try to involve themselves in economic activities. And most of the biggest challenges that they face is transportation. So when we introduced pay-as-you-go, basically we were targeting women in the rural areas, which is the last mile. So when you look at Onyx Connect, what we do is very different from other players that are in the mobility sector. We are focused mainly on the last mile, which is the rural of rural, where most players look at those areas as being uncommercially viable and also uncommercially sustainable. Most companies, including the government, do not go in these areas because one, they're completely off the grid, they're very scanty or non-existent telecommunications facilities, and to couple it all, there's completely no means of transportation. When you look at the population of Zambia, we're around 18 million people. Almost half of that, about 8 million or so, are disconnected from a road network or road infrastructure. At this 21st century, that is not supposed to happen, but this is something that is going on. So we are the champions and advocates to make sure that we can bridge that gap, make a difference, and transform communities. So the last 2 years, we have been working with some of women's group we have in Southern Province, which is in the southern part of our country. There's a Kaziwa women's group. These are farmers. They are milk farmers predominantly, and there are about 20,000 of them. And the mobility solution we have provided for them, so far to date, we've provided them with 200 bicycles, Buffalo bicycles, but it's a drop in the ocean because there are 20,000 of them. So you can look already at the demand and the scale at which we need to make sure that we can incorporate this mobility aspect to the levels that it actually requires. Because these women, where they live, it's where these mobility tools are needed. We're also working with village banking and village savings group, which are predominantly run by women. And then what we found out is that when you look at the dynamics, the social and income dynamics of these groups, they earn less than $10 a day. So in order for us to make sure that the pay-as-you-go for the bicycle was more effective for the rural population, we have introduced a business model which is called a cross-subsidy model. So what we do is that we provide a risk-free pay-as-you-go payroll deduction, repayments, and we recycle those funds into the rural areas to make sure that those are areas where we recover the repayments over a longer period of time, say 2 to 3 years, and they pay very minimal amounts. The reason for that is that when you also look at the dynamics in the rural areas, most of them are subsistence farmers, and there's climate change, so most of their income is very seasonal. So to make sure that you cater for those gaps in the repayment cycle, we are able to make sure that we recycle funds from high risk-free repayments with large companies that we have MOUs with. An example would be Zambia, which is one of the suppliers of meat in the country, including most of the Southern African countries. They have over 20,000 employees. So those are some of the employees that we provide the bicycle, and we collect payments via payroll. And those funds, 80% of those funds we use to get additional bikes, which we plow into the last mile, which is the rural areas. Also, we have been able to provide our bicycles on pay-as-you-go for traders. And this is where we are looking at unlocking the scale, both in terms of an economic social impact scale, as well as scale of impact in the rural areas. So when you look at the marketeers and traders in Zambia, we have over 1.2 million women traders. And the challenges that these women traders have is linkages to the markets. So they can harvest their crops at home. For instance, it can be tomato, vegetables, also watermelons, cabbage, but it is difficult for them to transport it to where they can be able to sell these products because the distances are huge. So they have to cover maybe an average of about 15 to 20 kilometers just to go to a place where they can be able to sell this produce. So this is where now the e-mobility comes in, because unlike the regular bicycle, the e-bike basically is electric, uses a solar powered battery. At bare minimum, you can ride with a minimum of about 20 kilometers an hour. So you reach your destination faster. And if you are able to sell and finish deliver your products, you can also go back and get some more. And you can have maybe an average of 5 to 10 trips a day. And that increases your income potential. Also looking at some of the women groups that we're working with, especially the women milk farmers. Milk is a perishable product. So it's got a lead time of about less than 2 hours before it goes sour. So you can already see that there's a lot of milk spoilage in Africa, especially in Zambia, where most women deliver milk to the milk collection center because of the longer distances as sour milk. So if they deliver a 20-liter container of sour milk, they only get $1 for it. Versus when they deliver fresh milk, 20 liters of fresh milk, they get $4. So you can already see the difference in income just by delivering fresh milk. So when we're looking at the e-bike mobility solution, this is something that takes above and beyond what we envision in terms of mobility in Africa. We can be able to use the e-bike to make sure that they can be fitted with coolers, which can preserve milk to last longer and can be delivered even the next day because it still be fresh, and these women still get top dollar for it. We are also looking and envisioning ourselves in providing these e-bikes in place of the regular bicycle. The reason being is that the e-bikes have more carrying capacity, where they can be able to carry more than 200 kgs of products versus a bike which has a limited carrying capacity because of the space of the carrier at the back. So our vision is to be able to provide in the next few months, based on funding opportunity from well-wishers, about 1,000 e-bikes. We have in Zambia about 435 markets. These are markets where there's a lot of trading going on, excluding the border areas. Zambia is a land-linked country. It borders 7 other countries. And there's a lot of border activities between Zambia and other countries. For instance, Tanzania, another huge market with over 70 million population of people is DRC. You are also looking at Malawi, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. So these are areas where e-mobility now becomes a faster way of delivering items from one country to another in the space of minutes, and also providing merchandise from that particular country into Zambia, which is needed. So these are some of the huge opportunities that we're looking ahead of us as we now try to focus and look at e-mobility. And finally, we also want to provide job creation. So right now, we have created over 600 jobs, because each bicycle that we provide to these women is actually a job created. And it also provides indirect jobs by virtue of that bicycle being used at the household level. So now, where the bicycle was used for economic activities, it can also be used for social and health activities, where you can ferry sick people to the clinic. You can also increase under 5 visitation for kids that need immunization. So a bike and an e-bike becomes a tool in unlocking unlimited potential for other social and economic situations that we never envisioned before. And I think I'll go to the point which Christophe mentioned. Africa is a greenfield on mobility, and we are now the game changers to make this a reality. And we are happy as Onyx to be at the forefront of this changing experience that will not only drive Africa's growth, but it validates that Africa is our home, and we are the game changers that it needs to successfully meet all its challenges that it faces. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wyson, for this inspiring and passionate input about what you do and also why you do it. I think we all agree that this is like, yeah, very important and very worthwhile way to spend your time on. So thank you for doing that, Wyson. And there was a thing that I would like to point out, or a few things from what you have been saying. So one thing is actually how important mobility is for different parts of life of people, and especially also in the rural context, where people sometimes are disconnected from places where they would need to be. But then also the importance of, if one brings a solution, how can this solution be made financially stable? And then working with, as you do it, with collection centers of milk, with employers who have, let's say, not only the buying power, but also the credibility. So that allows you to sign contracts with those and then deploy the solution to the people who work with them or who interact with them. So this is a very interesting model from which I think many of us can learn. So thank you for sharing that with us. And one highlight also that you mentioned is a tool for unlocking potential. a bike. It sounds simple in the first place, but it is true. It's a tool for unlocking potential. I like this quote of yours. I think we will use it in the future as well. And I like to mention at this place, we ourselves, as GreenTec Capital Africa Foundation, it is our mission to promote investment in entrepreneurs. So that's why it is so great also to have you here today, Wyson, because you are an entrepreneur. We are based in Germany, but also are active, of course, with subsidiaries of the GreenTec Group in different countries in Africa and working with entrepreneurs on a daily basis. So to see now how solutions that are developed by different stakeholders and also implemented, and then also see how they can be implemented by entrepreneurs, of course, lightens our heart. And to set things also in perspective, one of the reasons why we are hosting this webinar today together with the Deutsches Institut für Gutes Leben at the TU Berlin is a project that we have implemented together with the GIZ and the Strategic Partnership Technology in Africa, whereas it was our objective to bring together private sector partners from Africa and from Europe and see how they can create more value together. And this is also one of the reasons how the panel is constituted today, because you might have heard that the speakers refer to each other, because all of the speakers who are here today have a certain relation to each other and looking forward to work together with each other. This is just one aspect that I would like to mention. And now we move from Zambia again to one of those partners on the German side, which is Oliver with the company Anywhere.berlin. You've heard the name before, which is the company that has developed the initial version of the e-bike that was mentioned so often in this panel. Oliver, it's very great to have you with us today. And it would be great, as the other speakers did, if you would briefly introduce yourself and then specifically focus on the challenges that you have encountered as an engineer, basically, when you were engineering a bike that should also work in the rural context. Because obviously it's not the same as in the urban context. This would be interesting, I think, for all of us here in the panel and the listeners. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Hi, Nicho, Christoph, Mame, Sannssi, Nkapu, Winston. Yeah, we all know each other. I really want to just quickly go back 6 years with Stefan and me sitting in the park. I think we just finished our first prototype and we were chatting, the sun was shining, and I don't know quite exactly how it all came about, but somehow in the conversation, the phrase "forget roads" popped up. I mean, it was a very exciting time for us because we were just really uncovering what we were playing with. I mean, we suddenly realized we had a vehicle that could carry a whole lot of stuff, 150, 160, even 200 kilos, and go up steep hills and bounce across bad roads and bad territory. And it was really a pioneering time for us. I mean, we were overbowled by the significance in a way. We could, I mean, and then one of us said, sort of, forget roads, and I think it was Stefan who picked up on the phrase and said, that's it. That's what we're doing. And so that's a little sort of context of where we sprang from, because we had it sort of on a, almost you could say, a philosophical or conceptual basis at that point. We didn't actually, we had a bike and it was zooming around the place, but it was very untuned to the real African environment at that point, and supply chains and how to make it and how to distribute it and all of these things. So, I mean, there was but the bit that drove us forwards, and the bit that both Stefan comes, you know, he built he's the real engineer amongst us, and he built his own cargo bike way back. And I've been messing around with electric cargo bikes for 5 years before that, selling in Berlin. But what we both shared and what we both really understood was that everybody who has a cargo bike overloads it. And you know, you see in Berlin, you see sofas moving around on cargo bikes. You see any number of things moving around. So we already knew that this capacity to carry a big load, and then that pointed to the. I think the thing on an engineering basis, the thing about that is that you can't do this on 3 wheels, because the moment you move to 3 wheels, you lose the track. Suddenly you've got 3 tracks, and this is a very significant thing. This is why in the DNA of Anywhere.berlin, we're a balancing act. We're a 2-wheel vehicle, because once you move away from that, you can't forget roads anymore. You need a better track. You need a better path. And if anybody in Africa can confirm that, you know, you're driving down a bit of tarmac and suddenly it disappears. It turns into a mess. It turns into where the contractor didn't do it properly, and everybody stops, and then you see all the trucks and everything's piled up, and all the trucks are trying to find their way through. And the people who find their way through that are the 2-wheelers. They go shooting straight through because they only need to find a little path through that whole story. And that is that concept of not really needing the asphalt. And Christoph has touched on that a lot with the CO2 value of CO2 cost of building roads, let alone promising roads, which, you know, in this real world, there are a lot of promises go out there and then it doesn't happen. So all of these things sort of conspired for us to bring it into it pushed us forwards, because we could see that the path network that covers actually the planet, and it's got a sort of ancestral tinge to it, which is really nice. I mean, I you know, I'm not romantic, but I mean, I like the fact that one's reusing the old roads, the old routes that already exist. The brown path that is part of the whole of civilization's makeup. I love that part of that whole story. And here we are, sort of in the 21st century, reusing that, using sunshine, harvesting sunshine, and using it. And I find this sort of, you know, that's driven us forward. I mean, Stefan and me, we haven't made a penny, you know, in this game, to be honest. But we can't stop. And we don't want to stop. And we can see it slowly with the help of Nicho, Nkapu, Christoph, and all of these people, Wyson. I mean, we're seeing the path forwards. I think the thing, you're looking at sort of a bunch of people here, and we're very early in the game. That's the thing. And what I discovered previously with electric cargo bikes, when I was early in the game with that, just for moving family children around Berlin, is that there's not a great deal of advantage to being early in the game. It doesn't pay back, actually, because you're struggling to convince people that this is something worth doing, that this is the right direction forwards. But we can't, you know, the other struggle that we've had is getting the money down. I mean, there are plenty of different aspects of this, but getting the price down to something, and we're getting there now. Now we're really getting there. Now we're looking now in Kenya. We expect to be producing this year a bike which is made for the frame will be made from steel that comes from Africa. That steel will be made into tubes that comes from Africa. And so the whole frame will be African, fully African, from resource right the way to end product. Not the motor, we can't do that yet. Not all the bits and pieces, but that's what we're looking at, and that's where the cost comes down. Once we can achieve that, then we can spawn this whole story, because it really is the story that is just waiting to happen, because the infrastructure, the road, the asphalt, the road infrastructure of Africa, I mean, it's essential in some respects, but for the more granular level of infrastructure that Wyson was talking about, 2 wheels are the solution. And if we want to save the planet and dump fossil fuels, then it's electricity harvested however, but not by digging big holes in the ground and pumping it out and burning it. I mean, that's over. And just as a final note, I'd just like to say, especially in terms of energy, is there's a sort of polemic note to this, and that is the use of the word alternative, because I'm finished with the word alternative when it refers to energy. It's just energy, because the alternative is actually the alternative, coal, fuel, all those other things, they're more expensive. They're actually more expensive. So it's not the alternative anymore. And that alternative sort of bleeds into mobility. So if the energy source is not alternative, then the actual mobility source for doing micro logistics is not alternative. It's the mainstream, and that's the way we should think about it. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver, also for being so passionate, especially about your last point about the energy. It's a very interesting point actually to consider. Looking at energy, we are already 1 hour into our conversation, and it has been quite interesting, insightful with all of you. We would like to pick up some of the questions that came in the meantime. And there is a question that came in from Johan van Rensburg. And the question goes to you, Nicho, actually, and it is about energy, and that's why we would like to ask that question. It is, hi, Nicho, it will be interesting to hear some of your ideas on how the problem of reach of the solar power source can provide a possible opportunity for a network of micro power supplier businesses. So looking into, is that the future, to have specific hubs where power can be produced using solar? And Nicho, as the question was posed to you, it would be nice if you have an answer to that, or if you have an idea on that. But then also, Oliver, last time when I visited you in your factory, basically, we talked about batteries a lot. So you can already think about the topic in the meantime, whilst we hand over the question to Nicho first. Nicho, you're still on mute. You would have to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, it's quite interesting that the question came up, because that is another thing that we're exploring. From the bike's point of view, there will be something that we call charging stations. And these charging stations will be placed very close to each other, probably in proximity of about less than 10 kilometers each. But they don't just become the charging stations for the bikes. They will be harvesting the sun to actually power the batteries. But on top of that, they can be used by a small guy who's running a business, maybe the car wash in an urban area, or someone who's got a small market in a rural area. But it can actually enable any possible way of communicating, because the cell phones will be charged, but you can actually operate a computer from that. But on top of that, in highly, population density areas, you can use other, energy mix that comes from biogas based on their waste, but storage as well. So that has been proven, and we have tested some of them here, which is where Nkapu is actually playing a big role through the company that they've established to look into these models. And that can be applied anywhere. So meaning that waste becomes a solution, despite being a nuisance to most people in terms of energy generation. Excessive food supplies to other spaces can actually be used as well to produce biogas that can produce energy, and in advanced manner, it can actually be used to produce electricity. And coupled with solar power, that can actually give out a lot of electricity in the rural of the most rural places on Earth.
Thank you, Nicho. Thank you, Nicho. Oliver, as I've already told you, we shoot the same question to you, and maybe with a specific focus on batteries and how also the future of batteries look, and how they can be maybe better utilized when it comes to that sense.
Well, first thing to quickly say is the sort of chemistry of the latest generation of batteries is getting benign. So the child labor story is it's not over, but it's going. So I just want to get that out of the picture because it's, you know, there are a lot of detractors from lithium ion batteries who sort of start waving that at you. But the larger producers are moving away from the chemistries that use that. So we
Oliver,
like to...
Oliver, allow me to come in here because that's already, you're picking up already the questions from the audience. There's a question that says, do you think lithium or lead batteries will be the best answer? So please go ahead. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, okay. The short answer to lead acid is you cannot get enough power density into a lead acid battery for e-mobility. That's it. It's just, I mean, the equations basically run at, there's 10 times the power density for petrol to lithium ion. And then there's another 3 or 4 times the power density, or at least twice the power density between lithium ion and lead acid. So it just means you can't carry the weight around. That's been the popularity of petrol and diesel, is because that fuel is very power dense. I mean, it's like carrying a huge bonfire around with you basically all the time. So, but the lithium, nothing's perfect. It's just not perfect. Lithium is not perfect, and we can't pretend it's perfect. But it is fundamentally a benign technology, and it's what we have, and it translates very efficiently from solar to lithium is a fairly efficient pathway. So the issues that I also sort of see is that when lithium, I mean, there's no escaping it. It's what we're going to be dealing with for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. That is the technology. There isn't another one. There's hydrogen, and that's great, and hydrogen is all good, but it's not matured enough, and it has a very high inefficiency for creating it, because fundamentally, to create hydrogen as a fuel, you have to compress it, and the amount of energy it takes to compress it means that it's is almost as much as it gives back. So it's sort of got a double cost built into it. But I'm not dissing hydrogen, because it's a fine idea, and I'm sure it's going to be there one of these days. But we like the only issue, the other issue that one can touch on quickly with batteries, which sort of covers the whole continent in a way, because you can say lithium ion has already proved itself to be the solution, and it doesn't look like there's a competitor in the short term. So that is the solution, as it were. But the disposal of the thing that's sort of is tricky is the disposal of cells at the very end of their use. So there needs to be an African-wide strategic policy for all lithium cells coming into Africa, that they don't end up in the trash heap somehow. And the way that can be done is by putting a value onto them so that they find their way back to recycling facilities, and that's probably the solution. But that no one's touched on that really yet, and someone does need to touch on it before we all meet our success, as it were.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for that overview when it comes to battery, when it even comes also to the future. We've been talking about the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's quite interesting and quite insightful. And also the audience was or is interested in that topic. Representative of Technoroads I from Tanzania had asked specifically that question about disposal of batteries and what the plan there could be. And in this regard, I would like to mention an association that has recently been founded, which is called CE for Africa, which means Circular Economy for Africa. It's an association in which our mother company is a part of. And basically, this association is a group of different companies from Africa, but also from Europe and other players who are active in the field. and try to better understand how can circular economy have an impact. And I'm mentioning that because now specifically when we talk about e-mobility, the circular aspect becomes actually so important, what you just mentioned, Oliver, so that those batteries do not end up on waste dumps or wherever. And whoever is interested in the association Circular Economy for Africa, you can Google it, or you can also reach out to Amami and me later on, and we can give you information if there are any players from the circular or recycling industry in the audience today. And there is another question. There are quite some questions that came in, but this one I specifically like, and I would like to pose or to ask as time is short. And this question, let me read it out for you. It says, I support the idea that we should create bikes that are compatible with the African roads instead of waiting for better roads. So you see already there is confirmation from the audience. For the short term and rural areas, this can have great impact. On the other hand, how do you believe that we can change government policies on the long term so that cycling becomes part of our habits and, for example, bicycle lanes become part of the infrastructure in the major African cities? Me having an origin in Guinea, to that I can just say that cycling in Guinea is something that is not, let's say, seen or perceived as something good, you know, so everyone would aspire to the car or to the motorbike, right? So just from the reputational aspect. So this is one of the questions that is in here. But then second, also from a policy perspective, how can policy change that and also build even though we talk about not having so heavy infrastructure, but build the needed infrastructure. So for instance, that you have just maybe in the urban areas, bicycle lanes, and so on and so forth. And I would like to pass that question on to Nkapu first, because you seem to work in a community and you also have to work with the regulators in the community, and your opinion on that would be quite valuable for us. You are also still on, yes.
No, thank you very much, Sannssi, for the question. Here in Sharpeville and also in our province, we also engage our authorities in terms of regulating the movement of this bike because it's fast. It's faster than the ordinary bikes that we normally know. And we were then promised that there will be a policy, I think, drawn, particularly for this purpose, that they get permission to be on the road, because when they are on the tarred roads, they move so quick than even a car. And so what has happened now is that we also propose that there should be maybe the bicycle lanes. We have an area here in Gauteng, Soweto, where there are bicycle lanes, and that's why we're proposing that when these bikes are introduced in the urban areas, there should be bicycle lanes for this purpose. We also went to our rural area here around Mfuleni, my municipality, where we tested this bike on the gravel road. And it is nice to ride it also on the gravel road. That's why I think Oliver and Stefan came up with that theme, calling them off-road e-cargo bikes. And the other thing is that with our authorities as we speak now, they're not really harsh on us when they see us, moving around with these bikes. But like I said, soon when this, actually, I think Oliver touched on that, because when you involve the authorities, it means that there should be also funding. We be assisted in terms of making sure that we manufacture more of these bikes. But the issue is that we need support. Actually, we need support, more assistance for entrepreneurs so that they can grow and do their business. And the other thing, I just want to raise this issue that in Zambia, I've seen that the women are pedaling too much on the bikes. And with these e-cargo bikes, you don't pedal a lot. It is very compatible, it's very comfortable. You just pedal once or twice, and then it moves. So you go quicker than using, continuing to pedal. So I think with this issue of policy and government having to make sure that it makes lives easy for our people, so that they can access wherever they want to go, in terms of having to sell their goods and whether they're going to work and so on, using these e-cargo bikes. It will be assisting a lot, and we think with the support of everyone, there could be also a proposal also in terms of other additional things that needs to be put on the policy, so that government can assist us as entrepreneurs. Thanks.
Thanks, Nkapu, for also talking about the experience, how it has worked on your side, and how you think it could be done in the future. Wyson, it would also be interesting to hear your perspective on the topic of policy, because you also have agreements with local governments, but maybe also looking at a more global perspective. So looking at different countries, maybe even beyond Zambia. Do you have ideas on how we can influence policymakers so that they take two-wheel transport solutions seriously and think them into their policies?
So thank you very much, Sannssi, for that question. So in Zambia, what we've done is that we are actually in very active discussions with a lot of stakeholders. Amongst them is the local government, Ministry of Local Government. They are the custodians of all the local road infrastructure around the country. Fortunately, we also have a very good relationship with the Lusaka City Mayor's office. In the future, in the very near future, we are advocating for once every month we'll have on a day that is every month, where we have a bike day. Pretty much this is another business opportunity that we want to explore, where people with cars park their cars at the shopping mall. We have a lot of shopping malls which probably can house over 500 cars. So they park their cars at these malls, and then they rent bikes which they use for them to go to work or do whatever activities that they want to do. So with the local government, pretty much some of the advocacies that we are doing with the local governments is advocating for safer bike lanes and also for safer street lights. Because if you see in Africa, because of lack of energy, most of the roads do not have street lights. So bicycles are normally used during the day, and it's difficult to use them during the night. So when we look at bike infrastructure, these are some of the things that we want to advocate and lobby the government to make sure that they put up street lights and also user-friendly bike lanes for people that cycle or use e-bikes to be able to use those. We've also partnered with an organization called CIG Zambia. Pretty much they do advocating for road infrastructure for both urban and rural areas. We've also partnered with Road Transport Development Agency. These are the people that actually manage all the road infrastructure around the country. I think we'll be having a meeting with them next month, and part of it is to make sure that we also advocate for rights for cyclists and people who use e-bikes, because I don't know whether it's a culture thing. People pretty much respect cars and don't respect any other alternative means of transportation. So there's a lot of awareness that has to be done, especially as we start to putting more mobility, transportation solutions such as regular bikes, e-cargo bikes, electric scooters, that people are sensitized on how they can coexist with people that walk, people that use cars, and people that use different means of transportation as a collective, what can I say, solution to make sure that we have better mobility for all. And lastly, the beauty of e-bikes is that I'm also a passionate advocate of not disturbing the ecosystem, especially in the rural areas. So I would rather not advocate for better road infrastructure in the rural areas, because we need to conserve nature. And also there are things like streams. You have also water bodies. So if you start creating road infrastructure in these areas, basically you are disturbing the ecosystem. That's why, to Oliver's point, we want to make sure that these electric bikes only have two wheels. The reason that they can be able to be used in the deepest or most harsh African terrains, but still serving the purpose of providing mobility to those that need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Wyson. Thank you, Wyson, for that insight. We are slowly even coming to an end. The discussion feels as if we could continue for an hour, at least from my side, because it's so interesting to hear what you all have to contribute to that topic. But we're slowly coming to the closing round. And before we go there, Christoph, basically for you, there's one question, and that would be a bit, now also after having heard from all the different partners what kind of projects they implement, and now you coming from also the scientific backgrounds, also trying to play a bit with what could happen in the future, how could the future look like. It would be interesting just to hear from you a little glimpse, just a utopia, because I know you have this utopia also for rural living and how it could look in the future. If you could give us a bit of a glimpse of that, that would be really interesting. And then after that, we would start the closing round with one question for each of the panelists. I know there are still open questions. I'm afraid we cannot answer all of them today, but feel free to reach out to us after the panel. So you can write us at info@greentech-foundation.org, and we will do our best to respond to your requests or even connect you with the panelists that are here today. And please don't hesitate to do that. It is our pleasure to see how we can connect you, how even we might be able to work together with you. So really do not hesitate. And yeah, from there we give it up to Christoph for your utopia on urban or rural mobility.
Thank you very much. And actually, what I would like to shortly spell out relates also to the last question we discussed, namely, how can, I would say, African politicians or so even be brought to supporting bicycles and so on. And I think what is important, and this is also my vision in a way, is that bicycles and all these questions are not framed as a poor man's transport choice. And if there's more development, there will be roads and cars, but really think, can we shape alternatives which don't need the rural road? The rural road, actually also in Germany, is not an economic viable thing. It's about having kind of making the villages still livable environments. But I actually think beyond the cargo bikes. Actually, they, for me, are a bridging technology. If you just look at the current landscape of transport means, we have already these kind of flying drones. I think they're, and also for passenger transport, there's helicopters and so on. I think they're overrated. But if you look what's happening in the military sectors, these things will be here in 20 years for the civilian sector, probably. Our walking robots are kind of a lot of completely different kinds of mobility instruments, which might not need the road anymore. So I imagine, to make my vision very shortly and a little bit geeky, so to say, I imagine a kind of elvish transport infrastructure in where we walk through the wood with walking bots without these roads, which first saved the villages and then destroyed them by hollowing them out. instead of this orchid system we have today, so to say, with roads. And that's where I'm looking to. So looking at a future where we even can skip building all these roads, not completely, but especially in the rural sector, which are very expensive and had a lot of problematic side effects. And I can imagine a better lifestyle, so to say, even a higher quality living in such a future without the car, but with high mobility. Yeah, that's kind of my vision. And I think Africa as a greenfield might be a place where we can really build a different transport infrastructure and not rebuilding it for the 5th time and suffering under it. Yeah, that's kind of my point. And I'm very happy to see how many people are already working from different sides on these questions. And I hope we will make progress. Thanks.
Thank you, Christoph, for this outlook, even looking maybe beyond the bikes, walking robots, etc., and so on. And there was one thing when Christoph and I had a conversation, maybe a little, just a small anecdote to lighten the mood to the end, for the end of the day. I met Christoph when we were organizing a logistics conference in Berlin a few years ago, and we saw what he was working on, and we invited him. And on those conferences, you always have also ministers, state secretaries, and so on and so forth. And we had a minister for roads and infrastructure from a West African country. I will not name the country at this point. And he was sitting on a panel with Christoph. And Christoph started to talk about forget roads. And he said, we don't need necessarily roads in the rural areas. So we should focus on other things like building solutions for which you don't need roads. And the minister sat next to him and was a bit baffled, let's say. And at some point he responded, look, it's a nice idea, but I'm the Minister of Roads and Infrastructure. If I tell my people that I won't build roads, I will not be re-elected at any time soon. So it was just a funny conversation that took place there, but it sparked a lot of interest in the end. And with that, we go into the closing round. And it would be interesting to hear from each of you where you see the current project that you're working on in 5 years from now. So what would you wish to achieve in the next 5 years? That would be great to hear. And it would be very nice if each of you could try to limit herself or himself to half a minute, so to a few sentences, on just giving us an idea of what will your achievements or your hoped achievements be in the next 5 years. And I would start. Let's start with Nkapu. I just go the list how I see you on my screen. So it's Nkapu, Oliver, Wyson, and then Nicho.
Thank you very much. I think my main interest is that of advocating for women to own their own businesses, to stand for themselves, and they should get support. And the other thing is that we see young people being unemployed, not being trained, not having skills, and which of course we need to support them. But at the end of the day, in 5 years to come, I think we should see many young women owning their own businesses, and maybe just to close it, to say we want this emancipation of women, African women, to be adhered to, not to be just a word of mouth, but in action, so that people can do, own their own businesses. They can be heard, because some of these women are really not given a proper hearing in terms of the concepts that they have in making sure that they assist in building the economy of their countries. But if they are being given a chance and a hearing, we can go far. In 5 years' time, I think women will be on top, and you will be having entrepreneurs that have started small and have grown, to become the employers, in their different own enterprises. That's my wish. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Nkapu, for this input. Oliver, same question to you. Where do you see Anywhere.berlin in the next 5 years? What are your impacts and achievements?
It's a hard question, but really I'd like to be picking up a magazine and looking at 2 or 3 competitors to Anywhere.berlin, all struggling to match our technology and understanding of what's going on. I mean, because we're sort of, there's a lot of interest now, and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing fast. But yeah, we're not a secret. Anybody can steal what we're doing in a way. And I'm waiting in a way for that to happen. It'll make me feel good when that happens. When I'm suddenly looking, it's like, hey, that's our bike, and that will be good. That would be good because it needs. I just quickly going back to something that Elon Musk did with Tesla cars, is that suddenly he threw open all of his patents. This was about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And everybody in the financial markets like, what's this guy doing? He's giving away all his secrets. And so eventually it came out that he did that simply because he said, I need the competition. This market is not going to grow fast enough without that competition. So I need the competition. So Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volkswagen get on board and steal my ideas. And that's now happened. That's it.
Nice, thanks, Oliver. That's an interesting way to see it, but I think also one that is very honorable to say, okay, the market grows if other players come into the market and not if I stay the only one. Thanks for sharing that, Oliver. Wyson, the same question to you. What are the impacts of Onyx 5 years from now?
I wish I can I can make my dreams come true right now, but in the next 5 years, I think I'm looking at Onyx being being a game changer in the African mobility context. Hopefully, in the next 5 years, would have reached almost 500,000 people that can be provided with means of mobility, either e-bikes, regular bikes, alternative mobility. But the real driving force behind it is that we want to use mobility to create jobs for women and youth in Africa. We also want to use mobility for income generation for women and youth and low income earners. Because when people are able to use mobility to create income, they are able to live a comfortable life. And that's what we are advocating for. And really, the people that need mobility are the people in the last mile, which is the rural of rural. So that's where our sweet spot is. Naturally, when you provide a solution, the money is there to be made. So that's our dream. So we are one of the people in the most difficult areas where we work from, because these are areas where typical funders or business houses do not see as being viable. So their interest is not there. They would rather concentrate along the line of rail. But we know, like Oliver has mentioned, when people understand the value of mobility, they'll come on board. 5 years from now, people will be queuing up to sign up for e-mobility and also electric bikes, because that's the future. And they know that after they use the electric bike, they can use the battery to power off their home, and their kids can study throughout the night, get good grades, become doctors and lawyers. So mobility has a ripple effect, and we want to be at the center or the nucleus of these great activities. And me being in South Africa in Sharpeville, I was transformed by Nkapu and Nicho. Great stuff they're doing with engineering. German engineering, I believe, is one of the best in the world. And here we are developing a cocktail, a concoction that will last the test of time. And and it's a very innovative one that speaks to the African mobility solution agenda. So I'm really excited about the future and looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wyson. Thank you, Wyson, for sharing that outlook and also sharing with us how important collaboration in the sector is for you going to Sharpeville and seeing also what the partners in Sharpeville do. And then, Nicho, you have the last word of the evening. It is again the same question to you. Where do you see your organization or maybe Sharpeville in 5 years from now with regards to mobility? You would need to unmute yourself, please.
Unmute, okay. It has been a great opportunity that we got, and since having had the collaboration with Anywhere.berlin, we came up with this Anywhere Africa. That is not longer just a brand, but an energy and mobility movement. And we see it in the future becoming an integrated solution to mobility, energy, sustainable green livelihood, as I said, that fuses urban farming as well as rural farming. But at the end of the day, we need to touch on every village, every location, any township, and any remote settlement beyond the limitations on absence of roads and electricity. And through this collaboration, we believe that the past 2 years, we have proven that, we have tested that, we have bent some of the fingers. And if we did it in the last 2 years, the next 5 years will definitely be more than what we have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicho. Thanks to all the panelists who are with us today. Before we end, Mame, if you can, it would be nice if you tune in your camera for a second so that also the audience know who they will interact with. Yes, Mame, hello. So I would like to present to you Mame. Mame is the mastermind behind setting up this webinar. And she will also be in touch with you in case you reach out. So thank you, Mame, for setting all of this up. And I just wanted to also let the participants see who's behind this and who will be your contact person at the GreenTec Capital Africa Foundation. With this, I would like to thank all the participants for being with us today and thank all the panelists. Thank you for sharing your insights, sharing your experiences. It was a pleasure to be with you. Me personally, I made a lot of learnings today and I hope you as well, and looking forward to how this collaboration will unfold in the future. With that, wishing you a nice evening and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Hope to see you all again in new successful projects.
Soon.
Sure.
Thanks also to our audience for listening to us virtually. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.